Welcome to the Recruitment Business Accelerator podcast. Creating a successful recruitment business is not about you being the best hands-on biller or driving most of the activity for your team. It's about you becoming the best strategist, marketer, and leader so that you can create a powerful business that grows quickly and does not depend on you. For the last 10 years, Nicky and Katy Green have been advising recruitment business owners just like you to do exactly that. If you want to grow your business by 20% to 250% in 6 months or less, half your hours, and build a powerful recruitment business that doesn't depend on you, keep listening. If you want it faster, visit centeredexcellence.co.uk/apply. Here's Nicky and Katy.
Hi there, welcome everybody. Katy, can you hear me all right?
Yes, good morning, welcome.
Technical issues there, which is always great. So welcome everybody to episode 4 of the Recruitment Business Accelerator. I'm your host, Nicky and I'm here with my fantastic business partner, Katy. How are you doing, Katy?
Hello. Oh, good, thank you.
No,
yeah, really
I can't
good.
Hear your volume.
Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now? Better? Got better?
Katy, can you? I still can't hear you.
No? Okay. How's that?
Can you hear me?
Better?
All right.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Hopefully you can hear this. Okay, so welcome everybody. And so today we're going to be talking about the management secrets of ultra successful recruitment business owners. And this is a really cool topic. It's also a very important topic. If you are managing a team in your recruitment business and perhaps you're getting frustrated that your team aren't stepping up and hitting their placements consistently month in, month out, or maybe you're just on the cusp of starting to think about hiring somebody into your business, but you may be a bit scared. It's like, what if they don't work? What am I going to be able to do about that? So whether you've got an existing team that you want to get uber performing or you're just about to hire, what we're going to cover today is going to be a real game changer for you. Now, certainly I know when I started out hiring, I made every single mistake in the book when it came to managing people, hiring the right people, and we had an absolute nightmare. And interestingly, though, that absolute nightmare got us to the point where we actually needed to get external help to teach us things that we didn't even know that we needed to know. And then off the back of that, having learned a ton of lessons, all sorts of different things, we ended up with a really, really high performing, successful business. And I know that was the same with you, Katy. You built pretty much your team and business from scratch as well. I don't know whether you had exactly the same sort of headaches and like, you know, as we always say, like we trotted the snot as well as, you know, so like we really know what it's like to build a business from scratch, and certainly hiring people and managing people is one of the hardest things, full stop. So
I would agree with that. I think it is one of the most difficult things to master. And certainly has its lessons along the way. So yeah, and you know what? I don't think that I think you could spend your lifetime mastering management of people and still have areas that you could develop.
Always. Always. So if you are joining us live on this Facebook Live, please type hello or hey in the box so we can see that you're here. If you're listening to this recording, it's likely that you're listening to this in the gym or on a walk or as you're driving your car, and that will be on our YouTube channel. And anyway, it doesn't matter how where you're listening, it's great to have you here. So what we thought we would do, bearing in mind that both of us have trotted the snot, but also sort of had businesses and teams that we've created from the start, I thought we'd actually just do an interview between ourselves. And I have to say, Katy is probably one of the best managers I have ever met, and she wouldn't be sort of shouting this out as much as I do, because that there's a result that she got with her team, which I just think is frigging brilliant. And so she had a team of, at this point, 55 fee earners, and they were on average billing £153,000 a head. And I want to know how you did that. And your business was an 8-figure recruitment business, of which you pretty much were there from almost from the get-go, but certainly built up from scratch as a recruiter, but then moved into the MD role for several years. So Katy, like when you started out as a manager, tell me, like, what was the hardest part for you?
Yeah, well, as you say, I definitely wasn't the finished article when I first started managing people. And in fact, I moved into recruitment, and then within 3 months I was managing people. So not only was I, building up my own desk and billing my own desk at that point, because it was a brand new desk, it wasn't a desk that was already there. So this was in a brand new market for the company. And so for me, it was that balance, that managing that balance of billing at a high level, because I was, very motivated and certainly, driven to be that top biller, as well as managing people. So I certainly made lots and lots of mistakes along the way with that. And one of the kind of key areas I think that people will be able to relate to here, that certainly, I made that mistake, was that I would very quickly switch to that kind of telling mode of people, thinking, look, I really haven't got enough time. I've got a bill here. I want to bill. I do want to manage, but at the same time, it's sort of like, you guys probably, it's quicker and easier for me, let's say, rather than to sit and coach that out of you, that I'm just going to give you the answer. But of course, as we all know, the problem with that is that people aren't necessarily bought into that answer because it's your answer, and there can be more than one way of doing something. So what you're doing is you're sort of feeding people something that they're not necessarily bought into. It's not linked to why they want to do what they do. So they might give you all their, yeah, great, thanks for that, walk off, and then actually either will they do it, or will it even get the right result for them? That's the other thing, isn't it?
Well, most people just won't do it because it's
right.
There's not enough reasons in it for them to do it. So how did you get out of that habit?
Well, it was one that I had to work on because, again, for me, it's that time. It was always that sort of time factor. One of the things that I, very quickly noticed was that if somebody came up with a solution themselves, how much more bought in they were to delivering all the way through from start to finish on that action. And actually, when part of this probably, I'll be honest, didn't necessarily come from me saying, oh, I'm really going to outwardly decide that I'm going to change my approach. Some of it was actually through trial and error, which was, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I didn't necessarily give that person that immediate answer to that question that they've asked. And it could have been because maybe I didn't have enough time. So I might have said, look, I haven't got time right now. I'll come back to you later on. And actually what started happening, even by doing that, by kind of, if you like, gently setting some boundaries around my time, meant that people were then coming up with their own solution. And actually, funnily enough, when they came up with their own solution, they'd then go and take action on it, and it would get the right result, or it would get a better result than none at all. So it was very much about realizing that people actually have the answer within themselves. And my role wasn't to give them the answer. My role was actually to help tease that out of them and to create situations that were empowering for them, and situations where they could feel that they could still make that decision, and it didn't matter if it wasn't necessarily the right decision. So I think that's probably another biggie was, look, guys, it's not about the result you get, it's about whether actually you take the action. That was the key thing for me, was more about getting people to take accountability and start taking action for themselves.
Yes, because the thing is, and we see this a lot, if you've got a very dictatorial management style, or you feed everybody everything, you can never go on holiday, you can never switch off, can never leave the office, for a day or 2 days, because people then simply can't take action because they're waiting for you to give them the get-go. And it just then creates an enabling relationship rather than a really self-empowered team. And you're right, Katie, it's about you setting those boundaries up, but like holding yourself, it's ultimately your fault if you're answering these questions, but you holding yourself accountable to actually get people to start answering the questions themselves. Okay, so here's another question for you. When you first started hiring people, what was some of the biggest mistakes you made that you wouldn't make now?
Okay, yeah, that lovely hiring. Okay, so for me, getting hiring right, there was an unconscious habit, which was that, and again, I think people will relate to this, is that you tend to look for traits that you see, or perhaps you think are your strengths, that you look for in other people. So what was happening was I was making hiring decisions based on, if you like, an emotion rather than an evidence-based criteria or factual, which is, actually what's the role and what does that role need to do? And what does that role look like when it's being performed at a high level? And then am I actually interviewing based on pulling out and again teasing out those strengths or that evidence, the facts of whether somebody can actually do that job? So, I know it's a known fact, and I'm sure people are aware of this, but 80% of hiring mistakes are due to people making decisions based on emotion, right? That's what we do. We decide whether we like somebody in the first 5 minutes, and then all we're doing is we're looking for evidence all the time throughout that interview to actually back up that our decision is right. And the problem with that means that unless we're asking the right types of question, like competency-based questions and really testing evidence, it means that we are unconsciously, we're actually going to ask the type of questions that we want the answers to. So we will ignore warning signs and we will actually focus on proving ourselves right, essentially. And that's actually a really, really expensive mistake to make. And I know that because I definitely have done that. And I would say that was one of the hardest parts for me, was to understand I've got to switch this. I've got to get clear on what superior looks like in each role. I've then got to build a clear and measurable job description from this. And then I've got to make sure that I'm going to do a thorough interview process, which is, more than one interview. And actually I need other people involved in that interview process other than myself to make sure that I'm testing that, that other people are seeing those same behaviors, if you like, that same evidence that I am. So layering the recruitment process or the hiring process to make sure it's really robust and that I've got the right tests and methods in place in that process to be able to know that consistently I'm using the same approach and I'm hiring the right people. And one of the big shifts that we made, and I know, Nicky, we train this, one of the big shifts that I made, which makes the difference for people, is hire for attitude, train for skill. So, get clear on what your values are as a business, get clear on what those behaviors are, those softer skills that you want to see in the individual, and then specifically how will you measure those through the recruitment process. So they might actually be slightly different to some of the competency-based questions that you might be asking. It could be that you are going to get some of your team involved and that you are going to do a social with these people as part of the process, or you are going to do a work shadow so that they actually feel relaxed and they might ask somebody a question that perhaps they're not going to ask me in the recruitment process. One of the things that actually had quite an important part for me within my recruitment process was our receptionist, who was just brilliant. Natasha was brilliant at reading people, and how somebody interacted with her in the first 5 minutes that they walked through our door was actually a real telling sign for me as to whether they were a right type of person for our business. Yes,
and interestingly, we actually made that part of our interview process. Obviously, candidates didn't know that, but we got the feedback from our receptionist, and if they were dismissive or rude, or in any means not following our values, and they didn't get hired. And it's interesting you say about this, because I think it took us, and we almost had to go down a very painful journey of hiring the wrong people consistently to really sort of step up our interview process. But I remember when I first started out, I was just so pleased anybody would even want to work with me. I just like, as long as you've got 2 arms and 2 legs and you can speak, then then join us. And I think that's what happens. I mean, I know that's what happens with a lot of people. You think, well, who am I to choose who or to say no to somebody? You almost get desperate. So you just pick at anyone. And I think that for me was one of the mindset shifts, where actually we've got something really brilliant to offer people, and the way that we'd set up the business, it was just such a great environment for people to come into. It's like, actually, they need to work to prove to us that they need to be part of this versus the other way around. And like that mindset shift was, that actually I know that we're like an A player business, and so therefore we are only going to hire A players. And I mean, that's the mentality, like to always go to, like, we're only going to hire people who are absolutely the best, but from an attitudinal perspective. And the thing about this is, even if they haven't got experience, and actually we would recommend, and again, like one of the other myths is that you have to hire people with experience, which actually, and we're not saying that you don't, but actually if you hire people with experience, you almost need to put them through a seriously more thorough interview process and put them through exact same training as you would do with a junior, because they come with a whole host of bad habits and bad issues. But actually hiring somebody without experience and then training them was the best way. So, but there's always things in their upbringing that will signify whether they're a top performer. So it's things like, did they work throughout university? Did they work when they were at school? Like, it's likely. And if I asked this question in our rocket program, like, who here in the room worked when they were at school, and pretty much all the time everyone put their hands up. And that for me is just, that would be a really good question to ask. And if they haven't worked, I would find out, right, what stopped them, because sometimes there are reasons, but it's very rare. But they'll have done stuff throughout their schooling, throughout their, if they went to uni, which is not a prerequisite at all, which signifies that they push themselves outside their comfort zone. They might have been really good at sport, or captain of the debating society, or really good at, artist. It's likely that they would have been a really A player in something, whether it's music, sport, science. It almost doesn't matter. There'll be evidence in their upbringing. So you want to be looking for this. And that for us was when we shifted and we hired people who didn't come from the world of recruitment, either as graduates or trainees, or people who'd like second jobbers who'd come in from industry, and train them up. That was the thing that made a big difference for us. And we really we put a lot of ownership on coaching, on mindset work, as well as the actual skills training. And that was a difference as well, because if you've got somebody who's in the right frame of mind and who's got the right cultural fit, they'll be able to learn whatever you throw at them. So here's Katy, another question then. So you managed to get 55 fee earners billing an average of £153,000 a head. And just tell me, did that include newbies as well?
Yeah, absolutely everyone. So that would include anyone, let's say a brand new starter, I might have recruited them yesterday. That would include everyone, and probably about 20% of our staff at that point would have been new starters, new joiners. So so that tells you actually the average billings for our consultants and our experienced guys were much higher than that. Yeah.
So how, like, if you were to say to someone, here's 5 things that you must do to get that level of performance from a management and leadership perspective, what would those 5 things be?
5 things. Okay. So, well, the first thing I'd say or the first thing that I did was I was like, what is the formula for a high performing consultant? So to get to that point, if you like, it was modeling excellence. So it's saying, right, okay, let's take our top people, let's take our champions, let's take the people that are smashing it out of the park, or that we know are achieving those levels that we want to achieve. And then specifically, what we actually did was interview them. So specifically, what is it that they do and how is it that they do it? So we got under the skin of every single task that that individual would do and where their real areas of strength were. And then we got clear on how they did it. And it could be, let's say it could even be something like, I don't know, like the types of questions, control questions, for example, that they might be asking a candidate or they might be asking a client, that maybe some of the other consultants were missing out those one or two key questions. So we were looking for that magic formula and those golden moments that those individuals do, and specifically how they did it, so that when what we did was cascade that down. And we use them as buddies, as mentors as well, these champions, so that it was very much, let's say it's the same thing, you've got a sporting team, isn't it? You'd say, right, who are your A-class players? And then what is it that they do? What's that magic formula? And then how can we retrain that into other individuals? So I guess that's a real key thing. A second thing would be, and I would say it is, we were always refreshing and doing short, sharp training sessions with people all the time. So training never ended in our business. And they weren't all delivered, by the way, by me. They weren't all delivered by the managers. Actually, the guys would have training sessions in the Monday morning meetings or on a Wednesday or on a Friday. They'd do a quick catch up and it would be a short, sharp 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Okay, guys, let's take a certain situation today and let's brainstorm it and let's get under the skin of it. Let's role play, let's refresh our minds on how we do this, because the amount of times that we've all said this, isn't it? And we know when people start working with us, Nikki, they come into the Rocket and sometimes they're saying, wow, this is actually a refresher of all the things that I remember. This is what makes recruitment successful. And maybe I've stopped doing a couple of them. It's the same thing with our teams. It's no different. We've got to keep making sure that it's really fresh in our minds and that, we're, if you like, behind the right behaviors and values, and we're acting every day. Our habits, which are 40% of what we do, our habits, are our conscious habits that are getting us the right results, not the unconscious habits that are getting us the results that we don't want. So there'd be a couple of things, other things that we would do. So running training sessions, modeling excellence, well, definitely our values. So one of the things that we drove really hard was our company values and how those company values cascaded into the job description of each person. And specifically, the values were their behaviors. So what are the behavioral traits of that individual? And then also what are the key capabilities and, I'll be honest, the key success factors of that individual. So where we modeled the excellence of those behaviors, we'd then be saying, okay, so what's different about, let's go back to, because it does link. So let's say I've got my top biller, then one of their behaviors might be, well, actually, one of the things is they're punctual or they're always on time, or, if they say they're going to do something, they do it. So if they say they're going to ring a candidate to tell them that I'm really sorry, but actually you haven't been successful, they would do it. Whereas, maybe somebody else was low prioritizing that action or not doing it because actually they didn't think it was as important. So we got really, really clear on what those behaviors and what those traits were. And then again, about retraining them. So the softer skills as well as the capabilities. And, there are some real key mindset, attitudinal traits of top billers that are really, really important.
The other thing I love what you did in your business, that again, so many people miss the trick on this, is in terms of their job description. So in order to get promoted, you had, key success factors they had to hit, you had key financials they had to hit, but then you'd also have behaviours linked around your values that they would need to demonstrate and have evidence of before they could then get promoted to the next level. And this was very, very clever because, again, it encourages the behaviour that you wanted to see, but also it meant that people couldn't get promoted unless they were living and breathing these values. And absolutely fantastic. And this is the other thing for me is, you know, getting really clear from day one, like what's expected of them, what their you know, what their targets are, what their job role is, so that they know this is what I need to do. And again, a lot of people, and I think it comes back to that point I said earlier about they're so pleased somebody's just even there. They just think that's, you know, they can't ask them to do stuff, or if they're not doing it, they can't pull them up on it. But it's about, you know, setting clear expectations from the front, and then, you know, holding people accountable. But you can do, but the fact that you linked it into their career progression was really clever.
Yeah, and it was funny because, you know, well, we know this, don't we? You know, people's biggest driver, let's be honest, is our purpose, isn't it? Our individual purpose is our fundamental reason for being. It drives our behaviors, you know, it drives your culture, it drives, you know, what your team do. So it's so important that you have those values in your business. And they're not just values that are on the wall. They're not just values that are on your website. These are values that really mean something. And you know, we used to have that saying, you know, cut me in half and I used to bleed aspire. And I did, you know, and the people in our business did too, because they were so motivated by what our mission was and by what we were actually doing in the world. And it was, you know, it might sound a bit fluffy to some people. However, you know, there is no doubt that people feel most alive when we help others. So once you have that meaningful mission and you are clear in your business about what that is, and then you align your values and your culture around that, then people will move away from just a job description and they will make it a meaningful and purposeful action and career that they have every day. And that becomes their guiding light on them making decisions. So this is the big difference between you having a group of people in your team that have the same job description versus them applying their talents differently. And that's absolutely when you get a business that is, you know, is exceptional and is smashing results out of the park, because that's a purpose-driven business, and that's where people want to be going, you know, and this is so important nowadays. And
it's interesting actually that, because it's not, what you're talking about there is not just a purpose-driven business. It's about having a very clear vision and a clear vision of where you're headed and why. And then for each member of that team to know, right, this is my role linked to that bigger vision, to the bigger why, but also linking it in around their own motivators. And like you mentioned that most of, I think money is one of the, it normally comes number 3 in people's motivation. Paying somebody more is not the way to keep hold of them, and it's certainly, you know, it might motivate them for a short amount of time, but then it wears off. Actually getting really clear on, you know, why are they doing this for them as well, and this was the big shift we saw in our business, certainly from an accountability perspective. You know, so they to have obviously their targets and their goals they needed to achieve and their KPIs, which were very, very clear. But then we would say, right, okay, so what actually does this give you? What does this get for you? Like, and what is it that you want to get from working as a recruitment consultant? Like, what's your reason why? And then actually then break it back. So like reverse engineer it. So say, for example, you know, we would have quite a lot of people who, you know, hadn't got their first house, or I mean, they're literally coming out of uni and couldn't afford to go out for the weekend, let alone but buy a suit and stuff like that. So obviously the first point of call was to get them so they've got a nice flat, you know, nice clothes. But quite a lot of our guys then wanted to buy a house, and you know what, and then we say, well, what does that give you? What's the difference that would make for you? And it's all about then security and feeling proud and actually sort of demonstrating that they feel successful off the back of that. But then we would link their targets or their KPIs, the day-to-day actions that they needed to take to that bigger goal, which was their goal, which obviously linked into our bigger goal and our bigger purpose as well as a business. And then get that really tangible so they could see exactly what I need to do and how I'm going to do it. And, the other thing which I learned, through my training was, if people aren't doing things, it's normally for two reasons. Either there's not enough reasons why they should do it, or the second is they just don't know how to do it, which therefore is a training and a coaching issue. So, we would have from our management system, we would have a very sort of clear sort of reporting system which held people accountable. So we'd have weekly accountability, either one-to-one, or people would fill out their weekly accountability. We'd have a Friday wrap-up meeting where we'd celebrate successes, we'd look at what we'd achieved as a business, and then we'd reset, what's the focus then for the next week based on what we've done. And then on Monday morning, sort of blast off meeting, really, like to get really clear on what the 3 business critical things are, exactly what people were going to be doing each week. But we sort of set that system up, and then we had monthly performance reviews where we had a one-to-one with every single part of our team where we review, what worked, what didn't work, and then bearing that in mind, what needed to be the focus, what needed the coaching and training for the next 4 weeks. And those meetings for us were like, they just did not move. Like, they were so important. And when I started properly implementing these and sticking with them, that's when we started to get consistent results. And we were what you focus on, you get more of. So like really getting on top and tracking KPIs. Because it's a bit like, it's a similar in the sports team. If you want to win the Olympics, you don't focus on winning the Olympics for 4 years or for 8 years. What you focus on is the stuff that you do on a day-to-day basis in the gym to achieve then certain goals, sort of short-term goals that will all then add up to becoming a gold medalist at the Olympics. And so by focusing on those daily and weekly activities consistently and tweaking those consistently, that was how we got consistent performance. And we were then always looking, how do we make this better? How do we get better? How do we get better at that process? But we were using then the data to actually look at where we needed to focus our time. So it's really important, I think, to make sure that you have got clear KPIs. But if someone's not achieving them, it's either you've either got a skill gap, a coaching gap. So there's a training need, a coaching need, potentially even sort of a motivational refocus. And if you've tweaked all of that, and like we used to say, we will do whatever we possibly can with this person for like 3 months. Now, if they decide not to choose to respond, that's fine. That's their choice. But we're going to throw whatever we can to support and to guide them and to coach them for 3 months. If, however, we see their behaviour didn't reflect that, then we knew that we had hired the wrong person, and we would then manage them out of the business as quickly as possible. But certainly over the years, we were really careful about who we hired. We had a really good staff retention rate in our business, but we were really careful about who we hired, and we looked after our guys. So we kept people for a long, long time, and that was the other thing. It's about constantly sort of reconnecting with what their values are, what's important to them, and helping them to continually learn and progress. So then it's almost like you never stay still. And that came from your monthly performance reviews. We did half-yearly appraisals that are based around like, what do you want personally this year from a personal development perspective? But people could see that they were always progressing. And we'd set, actually, and again, this is sort of stuff I take for granted now, but we didn't have this to set up with at all, where we had like a very clear career plan. So if you came in as a junior consultant, you could see, right, this is the plan that I need to go through. This is what I need to achieve in order to get promoted. So it was really visual. It was very clear, and that helped people to know, well, if I do this and I'm going to get this. And so that's something I would be recommending you have in your business too. Now, just Katy, conscious, we've probably got to wrap up in a minute. So just if you were to give people who haven't got any of this stuff set up, what would be the most important things that they need to implement now if they've got nothing set up from a management perspective, or they maybe aren't, their team aren't achieving what they want? What would you recommend that someone get started on to turn things around quickly?
So I think the first point for me would be understanding, we call it the scorecard, but understanding what are the key metrics that I know that if I have my eyes and my ears on those metrics and I know what they are, I could literally from a distance, I would be able to temperature gauge, understand where my business was performing, and most importantly, where's it going on that curve? So what's the direction that the business is going? Because if you don't have that, and this is regulating, your emotions on data, if you do not have that factual, tangible understanding of what really is going on in your business, then you're always really putting your finger in the air and you'll never be able to gain consistency. So it's so important that what are those key golden metrics that will drive my business and will give me an understanding of how I'm performing and where I'm going. Because once you've got those, it's literally like holding the steering wheel to a car and knowing that I'm in control of the direction in which I'm going. Because without that, you're not in control at all. You are literally working reactively to whatever is coming at you, and you'll never grow the business. And not only that, it will give you uncertainty, just breeds lack of commitment, and it also breeds lack of results. So you've got to give yourself the best opportunity. So even if people aren't necessarily numbers people, that's cool. I wasn't when I first started, but it is about saying, well, maybe it's the top 5, maybe that's where you're going to start. What are the 5 key metrics that I need to absolutely know at any one time in my business? I'm going to religiously look at it week in, week out, and I'm going to know where my business is going based on these numbers. And these would be things like, job flow, candidate flow into your business, first stage interviews, or if you're contract, it might be CV sent, or contract, it might go straight to, bookings taken, bookings filled, for example. So what are those 5 key metrics that are absolutely the key ones? Now, from that, there's probably one, which is your golden metric. But I would say, start with a manageable amount if you're not used to doing it. And it will really help you in a really, really short period of time. You will start to feel more in control of your business, or the destiny of your business and the destiny of your results. That's the first place I'd say.
And the thing about this is, even if your business is not achieving, so you're a bit in the poo at the moment and you're scared to look at those figures, it's just like, right, we have this saying, like, start with what you have and where you are, and just take action. So start with what you've got, and by doing that, just gives you the reality, and you can then see clearly, right, actually there's some big holes in these other areas. So just do it, and it will really, really help. Brilliant. Katy, thank you so much for your input. I hope you guys found that really useful too. So if you have any questions on this, please post them under this video, and we will be able to get back to you with answers on that. And we hope that you have a great week. And so we will be back live next week at Monday at 11:30 for our next podcast, which will be another corker. So we'll let you know what that is soon. All right, guys, have a great week. Cheerio.
Bye.